welcome back to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We are reading through the transcript of California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. And we are in the middle of the defense's case. We're on part 26, which is now Dr. Morton, who is being recalled. So if you remember, we're going kind of out of order. The defenses had to swap their witnesses around to fit schedules and things. So it's been a little out of order. They had to do that with the last witness, Cyril Wecht, and recall him. And now this is happening with Dr. Morton. He was on the stand a while ago and now he's back. So Dr. Morton is, I believe, a criminalist. What is it? A criminal and forensic pathologist. Sorry about that. So he's a criminal and forensic pathologist, both uh, two different categories of pathology that he is an expert in. So let's get started, and please hit that like button if you haven't done so already. I have lavender, bergamot, and a little bit of tea tree oil in the essential oil diffuser. So, in case you're wondering, and it smells lovely. All right, let us get started here. We have the court saying in the trial, is everyone present? This is, by the way, we are at the morning session. Morning's just beginning, Tuesday, December 5th, 1995. I like to give you guys, where we're at in trial time, so you know. Because, as you know, this is a very long 6-month trial, so it's taking us a while to get through. The court says, in the trial, everyone is present. Are we ready to resume? Ms. Abramson says, yes, Your Honor. The court says, okay, let's get the jury out. The jury enters the courtroom and the following proceedings were held. The court says, the jury is in the court. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume with the trial. The defense will be recalling the witness who was on the stand before. Ms. Abramson says, yes, we recall Charles Morton. And now direct examination will continue. So Ms. Abramson says, oh, no, he's sworn in. Was he sworn in again? No, he just resumes the witness stand. The court reminds him he's still under oath from last Friday. So this is now Tuesday. Please state your name for the record. The witness says, Charles V. Morton. He spells his last name. The court says you may continue your redirect examination. Ms. Abramson says, Mr. Morton, you previously testified that you have been working on this case since 1992, and you have had an opportunity to examine all of the photographs and to examine all of the physical evidence that was collected from the scene and at the coroner's office, correct? To the best of my knowledge, yes. All right. Now, you have also testified that you purchased an identical Mossberg 50406 shotgun and identical ammunition. Did you conduct a series of test firings at various distances with that firearm and with that identical ammunition? Yes, I did. And was your purpose in conducting those tests? And what was your purpose? Sorry. What was your purpose in conducting those test firings? Just to get a rough idea of the spread at various target distances and also to try to resolve an issue that came up between the difference between my observations and those of Mr. McCarthy in terms of shot pattern. Okay. And can you tell us what you mean by differences between yourself and Mr. McCarthy vis-a-vis shot pattern? Yes. The first information that I had received was that he had used the Fiachi number 4 buckshot for his tests, and his test patterns were significantly smaller than mine. That was before we had determined that he had actually used an ammunition that had shot cups rather than those without. So that's been a huge contention in this case, that the shot, uh, the, what are they called? The shotgun, the bullet, the casing, whatever, it doesn't have the cups It had different wadding and stuff. So some use like a shot cup, some don't. And it's that was one of the things that was part of the difference of what Dr. McCarthy used in his shot firings or test firings. And in addition, did you learn that the ammunition he used also was copper plated? Yes. And does the copper plating also make a difference in the size of the holes that the pellets will make when they go through a paper target? Never looked at that critically. I wouldn't think that they would make much difference. Okay, but you received Xerox copies, and did you not, of targets that Dr. McCarthy had made? Yes. And did you then do test firings to see whether you would have patterns similar to the ones that he was having? Yes. And you found that there was a significant difference when you say in the size of what? The spread of the pattern at various distances. And whose spread was larger at various distances? His using the wrong ammo or yours using the right one? Mine was larger. And did you bring with you to court today the test that you created in these test fires? Yes, I did. And did you also, after having done those test firings, did you prepare a graph? Yes. That shows the range, the spread pattern of the firing with the gun that you had and the ammunition that you used. Yes. Would you take those things out and we will mark them? You have given me 4 actual targets with holes in them? Yes. And they are at different distances? Yes. Okay. Well, then let's mark them. Your Honor, do you think we could mark them individually or with subletters? Whichever way you prefer. Okay. I think we'll do them as all one. Is next 335, Your Honor? Yes. Okay. The one that indicates 6 feet, Fiachi number 4, will mark 335A. The one that says 4 buckshot, 9 feet, will mark 335B. The one that says 12 feet, Fiachi number 4, buckshot, will mark 335C. And the one that says number 4 buckshot, 15 feet, will mark 335D. And then the buckshot spread chart that you have made, we will mark with the court's permission 336, and we'll put this up here. We used to have an envelope with a bunch more around here a few days ago. Mr. Morton, Mr. Morton, were you in court when Deputy Van Horn testified? Yes, I was. And did you hear Deputy Van Horn's testimony that with respect to the sheriff's department, they are loath to give any kind of distance information unless they have the identical gun that was used? The identical gun and the identical ammunition, yes. So remember, Deputy Van Horn, who was originally a witness, or at least, he was consulted in the first trial by the state, never talked to by the defense until after the first trial. And during the proceedings leading up to this trial, like they've never actually had communication except, I'd like you to testify, you're under subpoena. So, and then he comes in, Deputy Van Horn, for I think he's Beverly Hills Police. Or no, he's not. He's Beverly Hills County? Can't remember now. Um, oh, this is gonna bother me. Hold on, I gotta know. Okay, sorry, I had to look that up. He's a deputy uh with the LA, what did I say? I forgot already. He's a deputy with the LA County Sheriff's Department, so deputy sheriff with the LA County. So not Beverly Hills County, that isn't such a thing. It's the LA County like crime lab where he works, and he did the firearms examination and things like that. So in the original trial, first trial, original case. Um, and then this trial, the defense called him, but he said that the gun, he wouldn't care, he wouldn't be so courageous as to guess or provide a distance from shot range based on this particular or any crime scene if you don't have the identical gun and the identical ammo. So that's what he was saying. So just a little recap of who Deputy Van Horn was, and then I got sidetracked because I forgot where he worked. So sorry about that. All right. And with respect to the test firings that you did you do that so that you could say with any certainty at the precise range at which any of the wounds in this case were inflicted? No. Anytime you do test firings, the further away you get from the actual ammunition and weapon, the more questionable it remains about the accuracy of those determinations. So, why did you bother doing test firings if you can't give specific and accurate distance determinations? They can give you a rough approximation of a distance, and the purpose of this, with having the same weapon or the same model weapon, the same barrel length, the same ammunition, that gets as close as duplicating the original as possible. So, without having the same weapon, then doing these distances is about as good as you can get. He says without having the original gun? Yes. And did you find in your test firings whether there was a consistency to the spreading of the shotgun pellets as you did your test firings? Well, I did a limited number of tests, but I did generate a pattern that showed that it had an increase of about 6 feet, or at 6 feet, you get about a 1 inch increase in pattern size for each yard, which is pretty close to what is typically stated as a general rule in shot patterns, which is valid over a fairly, over a limited range, very close. That does not set as well because the pattern stays much tighter and has minor variations out to about 6 feet, maybe 4 to 6 feet, so that you do have some idea of the distance at the closer distance. That is what you typically rely on is the powder pattern. If I understand you, what you're saying is under 6 feet you cannot predict the exact spread of the closer distances. Well, you never try to predict the exact spread of any distance. You are only trying to establish a range that's reasonable for that particular spread. In order to do that, you look at not only the overall spread, but the separation of pellets within the spread. And of course, the more you have of that pattern, the more accurate can be your estimate of the distance. And you have more pattern when you get beyond 6 feet because that's when they really start to spread, correct? You get more variation beyond 6 feet. Yes. So remember talking about the conical shape that, it starts out small and gets bigger. So your spread is going to remain relatively the same up until 6 feet, and then it starts to spread more. So then you can tell more distance wise based on the spread, is I believe what he's saying here. You have more pattern when you get beyond 6 feet because that's when you really start to see the spread. Yes, you get more variation beyond 6 feet. So that's what that means to me. Well, you heard Deputy Van Horn testify that the rule that you have referred to, the 1 inch per yard rule, is a rule that you've stated that only applies after the point when you get to where the pellets have started to spread from that central cluster. Yes. And that's what you're saying as well? Yes. And this is a rule of thumb, a general rule. Where is there a general rule stated, or who promulgates this general rule that beyond 6 feet you can expect the diameter of the spread to increase by 1 inch or each yard away from the muzzle of the gun? It's been a long time since I looked in the various textbooks. I think Soderman, O'Donnell, and possibly Osterman and Henry. I wasn't being that specific. It's in the textbooks? Yes. Having to do with shotguns and firings and the ballistics textbooks. So basically, like, this is a rule that ballistics, the industry uses to, a general rule that they follow. He says, but you have to be careful of that. Again, it can be affected significantly by the specific ammunition. For example, in this case, that rule basically was developed before the shot cups became common, and those shot cups tend to keep a much tighter pattern. So using shot cup ammunition, it doesn't fit this general rule. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, let me try that again because I'm slurring my words for some reason. So using shot cup ammunition, it doesn't fit this general rule. That's correct. Is that right? But the ammunition you used was not shot cup. It was the same exact ammunition that was used in this case, correct? So no shot cup. That's my understanding, yes. And the spread patterns that you found did appear to follow that general rule? Yes. And the chart is hard to see because it's on, maybe it would be easier if we did one on reverse image where it's white. Did you send me a copy of that? I did send you a copy. But I don't think I had one with two lines. No, it's just one. What those two lines show is just the estimate of the diameter for a particular chart or pattern. Well, why don't you see if you can go over the lines in purple or maybe red? It might stand out more from back there. I can't see the lines at all. That's my point. The witness complies. Now, what do the two lines represent? What does the top line represent? Well, the vertical axis shows the spread in inches and the horizontal axis shows the distance in feet. So you have 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet, and 15 feet. And then you have 0 inches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as you can imagine, like a graph, I'm doing it the way I would look at it. So you have your axes. I can't remember which is which, but on one you've got the feet, or no, yeah, no, which is first? Yeah, on the one is the feet, the number of feet that the distance of the shotgun is, and then on your other axis, you've got how many inches it's spread. So imagine looking at a graph like that, a line graph, bar graph, whatever. All right, so maybe if oh, hold on. Sorry. Um, the next question is, and the 6 inches is the diameter end to end of the spread pattern. So the 6 inches is your spread pattern and a diameter on that piece of uh, the paper that they use, their target. He says, maybe if I showed on a particular spread pattern, it would help get across the idea of what we're looking at. She says, should we put these up? Yes. Now, I need the package of, all right, I think we better have this one up here. Here is a bunch of pins. So why don't you describe? You have got them in order of 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet. Yes. If going from left to right, we have 6 feet, 9 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet. And what you try to do is use both the diameter of the shot pattern as well as the distribution of pellets to try to assess what is a reasonable firing distance for any given pattern. As you can see here, as you go increasing distances from your target, you have greater and greater spread to a point where you have it at 6 feet, you still have the majority of the pellets forming one single hole with one scalloping around the ends, or a cookie, what's called a cookie cutter effect around the edges, and then a couple of isolated pellets or several isolated pellets. And what are the diameters or the spread width at 6 feet of that pattern? It goes from a little under 2 inches to about 2 inches. Okay, go on. At 9 feet, you can see where there's more separation of individual pellets, and then you also still have a major hole. That's partially due to pellet concentration and partially due to the fact that the wadding goes through the target. So the wadding goes with the gun. I mean, with the not with the gun, with the with the pellets as well. So the wadding gets projected as far as the pellets do until it hits something and stops, apparently. So it still has not dropped away, he says. Because of the lightness of the wadding, both the paper type wad and the fiber wad and the plastic wad, because they're lighter than the pellets and larger, they have poorer aerodynamics and are lighter in weight, so they tend to drop away sooner just due to gravity. So they can tend to just drop away, but they still do get projected quite a bit of distance because at this point we're talking 9 feet and wadding is going through the target. So at that point, I mean, they're getting projected quite a ways. So you can have, let's say, at that 9 foot target, let's say instead of firing into paper, if this were 9 feet away shooting at a person, would you expect the wadding to go in as part of the pattern the way those individual satellite pellets would be expected to go in? That's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer that. Okay, why don't you go on to the next one, the 12 foot? The next one at 12 feet shows much greater separation and actually still the wadding, at least part of the wadding still in the center or close to the center of the overall pattern. So at least one of these pellets wadding went through or continued on with the pellets themselves. At 15 feet, the one on the right you can see where the wadding has separated out a little bit more, and you can see separate entries into two different waddings. And what did you find to be the diameters of the shot spread on 9 feet, 12 feet, and 15 feet? At 9 feet, again, very close to 3. I would say close to 3 inches, which is 3 yards. 9 feet, roughly a little bit under 9 feet to a little bit above 9 feet. At 12 feet, about 4 inches, plus or minus a little bit. Now, are you prepared to tell us what the two lines represent because you only did one of each distance? So why are there two lines? So you can see, trying to measure the diameter of this, it's not a nicer round circle. It has some irregularities to it. So you can look around this way and have a little bit, this spread here from here to here would be greater than the spread across here. What I've tried to do is give an idea of how much there is a little bit of a variation even in one individual shot. So one line indicates the vertical, one axis to measure the diameter, and the second line gives a second axis to measure the diameter so you are able to get both. Essentially, it's like looking at the minimum and maximum diameter. The lower line would be the minimum diameter. So now we're looking at a graph where the minimum diameter is the lower line and the upper line would be the maximum diameter. All right. Did these test firings that you did assist you in any way in trying to determine whether, for example, certain of the wounds here might have been affiliated with other wounds and general distances for any of these wounds? They gave a little bit of assistance, but there is so much variation. In addition to the variation that you see here, well, let me add one more thing about these targets in terms of how you can use them for interpretation. We are not just looking at diameter, but you have to be careful when you're looking at portion patterns because in any given case, you could have quite significantly different patterns resulting at any given distance. For example, if you will notice this one at 9 feet, if you were to just look at this portion of the pattern, they are fairly separated. If you look at this portion of the pattern, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pellets right in a very short, limited area. So you have that kind of variation again at 12 feet, and you see a very similar kind of thing. A very tight pattern here, a much more spread pattern overall here on the left. You are talking about the distance between individual pellets? Right. Because at 12 feet, it appears that the majority of the pellets are individually separated out so that if they impact, you can see the individual pellets themselves. That's correct. Okay. And so you can see in the situation right here, you have almost 2 inches separating these pellets, and yet right here you have 4 pellets within 1 inch. Okay. So whenever you start looking at a portion of a pattern, it increases the problems in terms of trying to assess distance. So when you start looking at individual portions of a pattern, it starts to complicate whatever your assessment might be. And with 15 feet, there also seems to be some series of gap there. In other words, there seems to be an area where there are no pellets at all, whereas the surrounding areas, there are pellets close enough to have filled that space. That's correct. Okay. And if I might add, in addition to you have in addition to that, you have the problem of the target itself. In other words, these are nice flat targets, whereas typically something that's being struck in a shooting has a non flat surface. In other words, sometimes it's straight to a flat chest or something like that, but most of the time it's part of an arm or some irregular surface or rounded surface, which may represent a different target. Well, did you spend any time trying to analyze what has been characterized in this case as a round that missed? I think is the word that was used and went through the west window, the west French door, one of the windows in the west French door? Yes. And did you discern evidence that indicates that it is possible or even probable that that round that went through that window was not a full round that missed? There is, on the back of the sofa, a series of disruptions that it's hard to evaluate from the photographs, but clearly they look like disruptions that could be part of a shot pattern that appears to line up relatively well with that hole in the window. Okay. And is there any blood evidence that suggests that the hole in the window may have been affiliated with a wound rather than a missed round? There is blood, apparent blood, on the sofa in that area that looks like it might be. However, as is true with much of the scene, the potentially overlapping blood patterns make it difficult to assess what is associated with which shot. So there's 2 victims, 2 blood pattern spreads that are separate and individual from one another, but they're commingled in the crime scene. So you can't tell whose is whose, and it was never tested. Okay. Would you show us, though, on the photographs, what you mean by defects in the back of the sofa and, excuse me, and how they could relate to the hole in the wall, in the window? Yes, the area that I am talking about here is this display board number 3. I don't know if that's how you are referring to these. No, it should have an evidence number on it. Evidence number is 302. 302 in the center of this board, the bottom photograph in the center. Well, let's subnumber because otherwise I am going to do it. I am going to mark the 2 on the left row, A and B, and 3 up the middle, C, D, and E, and the 2 on the right, F and G. And I would also ask you if you could clip it to the top of this so that the jury has an idea of what we are talking about, what the window looks like from the outside. Is this something I am going to pull apart if I take this off here? No. All right, now we're secure. Okay, what we're talking about is this hole here, the photograph that's been clipped to the top. Does it have a number? Yes. This would be, this is complicated because yes, that's the only one on this. That's number 17. Exhibit number 17 shows a photograph from the outside showing two areas of the glass door that have shots through them. The one on the left, which we will refer to, is the west door, and the one on the right, this would be the south wall of the living room or the room where this occurred. This is the east door. Both of those have shot patterns through them. The walls look to be associated with this pellet pattern, and this being the west door, okay, is shown at the top of the sofa in photograph 302, photograph A. And well, would you circle those with one of the colored markers, Mr. Morton? It is very hard, I can tell you from back here to see. If you need one here, I can give you this red one I am holding in my hand. There is also a black one lurking up there. We're very low tech around here. There's a good one. The witness says, it may go, on photograph A, it may go down as far as very close to the bottom of the photograph, but the area I am going to circle incorporates most of the lower half of the photograph on that. The back of the sofa, you will notice there are various tufts that show irregularities on the surface of that, and that's shown in a number of photographs. In photograph E, again, I would circle it. It shows a portion of that, apparently, again, showing the tufting of the fibers in that area right there. I circled that. Why don't you look at B? I think B also shows it. That's the left-hand column, the second photograph. Yes, B shows it as well. And it also shows the apparent blood spatter associated with it as well. So, assuming hypothetically or assuming based on your hypothesis that those areas that you have circled that show tufting, it tears in the fabric of the couch. Is that what you're talking about? Yes. Fibers that have been lifted up. Yes, and broken. And are in the appearance of those fibers in those photographs that you have circled consistent with pellet impacts? They appear to be. The quality, the detail shown in those photographs is difficult to assess, but it appears to be compatible with that. So basically, they're pellets that hit the couch. I would actually want to see the sofa and check for lead and that kind of thing, but that's not possible because you didn't collect it. You understand that those photographs A and B and E are enlargements of what's up on the board, an enlargement printed from the photograph that shows a great deal more than what's in these? Yes. So you started out with a really small photograph, and only under enlargement can you actually see the defects, correct? That's correct. And so, does it appear from the tufting on that's the top of the back of the sofa, that a number of pellets had some contact with the top of that sofa? Yes. And is it your evaluation, looking at the photographs, that there also appears to be some blood spatter in the area that could be affiliated with the same round that's causing the tufting on the top of the sofa? That's correct. And you have examined the photographs, and there are others. In fact, I think down here on board 5. Well, that's the wrong door. There are some other enlarged photographs that are close-ups of this hole that's in the west door, and you have examined those photographs, have you not? I have. And this is the other door. This has been testimony that the shape or size of that hole indicates that a full round went through. Do you believe the evidence supports that conclusion? I don't believe there's any way to say one way or the other. The hole through the glass and the framing in the door and the glass frames are all damaged, and prior to that, the portion of shot that strikes it, or if it is a full shot, strikes some slats in the blinds, and so it has already been affected by initial impact with the blinds and possibly the top of the sofa and possibly even something before that. So, and when a column of shot impacts an intermediate target, such as the top of the sofa or the blinds, what effect does that have on the shape of the pattern? It tends to spread the pattern out. You get what's called a billiard ball effect. The first pellets that strike the object tend to slow down or get knocked out of alignment and bump into adjacent pellets. And so you get some of what's called billiard ball effect. And would that explain is that like deflection? Yes. And is deflection caused by hitting things like the wooden slats, the wooden frame on the window, the top of the couch? Yes. And does the fact that the hole is not a perfect round hole, is sort of a more irregular oval, does that have significance to you on the issue of deflection? Yes. I would not try to interpret an angle of that shot based on the configuration of that hole because of the of deflection and prior potential interference with that column shot. Now, you're aware of the fact that Roger McCarthy did, in fact, claim that the reason the hole is oval is because it was shot on the bias, and so he was predicting an angle to explain the irregular shape of the hole. Yes. And if I understand you, you're saying the irregular shape of the hole is traced to what you, at least the slats, which you can see it went through? That's the potential source of that irregularity, yes. So is it your opinion that less than or that there is a reasonable possibility that less than a full round actually went through that window? Potentially it could have, yes. I see no clear argument that it must have been a full round. And is it then your hypothesis or your conclusion that part of that round could have struck one of the decedents, causing one of the many wounds that we have been looking at and discussing here, it seems forever for weeks? Yes, I believe it could. Okay, I wanted to show you now. Dr. McCarthy claimed that support for his thesis that this came in at a bias angle was because there are pellet marks on the tree that is, I think, 31 feet away from the west window hole. Yes. Well, let me show you what Dr. McCarthy marked while he was here. This is Exhibit 8, and you weren't here, so I have to tell you what he was doing. He circled the hole in the window, and then he circled, boy, the glare is bad today. He circled an area on the top of the sofa that he feels was the zone of trajectory. Do you see that? Yes. And can you see adjacent to the circle that he made on the top of the sofa the very tufting that you have been talking about here? Yes. I will put this back. Now, based on your examination of all of the photographs, including the photographs of the tree, approximately how many pellets strikes appear on that tree? It's hard for me to tell which are pellet strikes, obviously, but it looks like there might be about 6. And would that be consistent with a full round being fired directly in the direction of that tree? No. And how would you account for any of the pellets coming through that hole striking that tree? The tree is off. Let me ask you this. Dr. McCarthy's thesis was since the tree is, off to the left and the hole is here, that the hole had to be made from the back of the room at an angle in order for the pellets to go towards the tree. Simple geometry, I think he called it. Mr. Khan says, objection, argumentative as to the form of the question, motion to strike. Sustained. Rephrase the question, please. Ms. Abramson says, his thesis was he drew a straight line from an area, an angle that he claims would cause a bias-shaped hole directly to the tree. Are you familiar with that testimony? Yes. You are saying that the trajectory was much more straight on towards the window, or, yeah, it would appear to be based on the damage of the sofa, yes. Based on the tufting? Yes. So, how do you go from a trajectory that's from straight on to the window to 6 pellets winding up to the east of the trunk of the tree? Well, you have to take into account the distance from the south wall to the tree is about 31 feet, according to what was measured, I believe, by the Beverly Hills Police Department. And at that distance, that's about 10 yards. You can expect maybe a 10-inch pattern if it were uninterrupted. But again, when you're talking about pattern, you're talking about the spread of the pellet pattern. The spread of the pellet pattern, correct. However, if you have an intervening target, each time it hits an intervening target, there is potential for deflection, and that deflection can result in some deviation and significant deviation. And if you look at it at that distance of 31 feet and the fact that the tree overall where the apparent pellet strikes are is about 13, I think 13 feet 7 inches was what was measured. 13 feet 7 inches from what? From the line of trajectory perpendicular to the door. So it's 13 feet to the left. In other words, it would be to the east. The tree's impact area is about 13 feet, 7 inches east of the hole through the door. Okay. So basically, what you're doing is a geometry of what that angle is, and that comes to under a 25-degree angle. And it may be that what we're seeing here is some deflection that results in that kind of angle deflection. Without doing a regular substantial number of experiments trying to duplicate to some extent the conditions that existed here, I think it would be very risky to suggest that that could not be due to deflection. It's risky to suggest that that could not be due to deflection. He says it's probably deflection. The pellets that hit the tree deflected from something else into the tree. So in your opinion there is a reasonable hypothesis that the marks on the tree were due to deflection from a shot that started out inside the room as pretty much straight on the window? Yes. So the pellets were heading straight towards the window, but it deflected and bounced or what not bounced, but deflected towards the tree in an angular way is what that means. Okay, so now I want to jump ahead here about what's on the next board, which is Exhibit 303. It's going to happen sooner or later, it's inevitable. Why don't you come down and help me, and I'll just get this one clipped up. Now we're secured, okay? When you testified last Thursday, you indicated that you had examined pieces of a white plastic bracelet and you had talked about the fact that there were 3 exhibit numbers, each of which contained one or more pieces of the whole plastic bracelet. Do you remember that testimony? Yes. And that board 303, does that show an enlargement, a group of exhibits that the Beverly Hills Police Department labeled 21? Yes. And what was contained within 21? There was wadding, a pellet, and fragments of a plastic bracelet. Fragments or fragment? I have forgotten now which one had the fragments. One of the two, 5 or 21, had 2 fragments. Well, let me get them for you. It might be easier. 5, the witness answers 5 was 2 fragments, 21 was 1 fragment of the plastic bracelet. And does that board 301 also show the exhibit called 5, which was bracelet parts on the couch? Yes. And in fact, if you take a look okay, I'm going to subletter these photographs on 303. The one photograph in the left column will be A, the next column is B, C, and D, and in descending order, the next E, F, and G, and the last 3, H, I, and J. And I'd like to call your attention to J. J represents the bracelet, at least one piece of the bracelet you see in the photograph that's found on the couch adjacent to, you can see from here, right next to Mr. Menendez, correct? That's correct. And does J also show a plastic or powder wad? Yes. And does 21 have a paper spacer wad, a pellet, and another piece of the bracelet? Yes. And was the third piece of the bracelet located behind the east side of the couch right at the foot of the bookcase? Yes. And was that called 16? That's correct. And can you see 16 in C and D on this chart? Photographs C and D? Yes. Now, in the center of this board 303 are the failure analysis illustrations F and G that purport to show the injury to the right arm where we have reason to believe the bracelet was, as occurring while Mrs. Menendez was lying flat on her back on the floor. Objection assumes facts not in evidence that the bracelet was on the right arm. Well, let's rephrase it, the court says. Miss Abramson says, did you note in the photographs that Mrs. Menendez is wearing a watch on her left arm? I don't recall seeing that. Well, I will show you one later. In any event, we know that Mrs. Menendez has a forearm and hand injury both to her right hand, right? So it's you would assume that the injury from her hand and forearm probably shattered that bracelet, right? He says that's correct. Both are severe injuries? Yes. Both indicate direct contact hit by pellets? Yes. Now, with respect to the two illustrations, F and G, they purport to show her receiving wounds to her right arm while laying on the floor, correct? Yes. And in fact, there are two different shots that Dr. McCarthy opines occurred to Mrs. McCarthy's Mrs. Menendez's right arm while lying on the floor. This one, which was Dr. Golden's number 5, and also the one that injures her hand, which was Dr. Golden's number 3. Do you remember that? Yes. In your opinion, Dr. Morton, did the double shot to her right arm that hit the forearm and her right arm occur while she was lying on the ground, as Dr. McCarthy illustrates? I know. Well, I see no evidence in the scene to support that, and there is substantial evidence in the scene to support that it occurred while she was either standing or close to standing, based on the location of the bracelet parts, the wadding, the pellets, the spread of the damage of the slats of the blinds in that east door, and the damage to the window. So the same shot that supposedly hit her arm is supposedly the one that went through and hit the tree, the door, and the window blinds. And so that's what he's saying, that there's no evidence that she was laying down because it's supposedly, he thinks it's the same one. Okay, you affiliate whatever hit the arm that had the bracelet with the hole in the east door, correct? That's correct. And you said the spread. In addition to the whatever caused the hole in that door, is there evidence of pellets striking in that area of the east door? Yes. And what bears the evidence of pellets striking that east door? The slats in the blinds inside the door. And are those holes in the blinds, the wooden slats of the blinds, visible even in photographs 303A? They are not well documented in photographs, but a few of them are, yes. And they can be seen in every photograph you examined that shows the east door? I believe so. And are you, based on your having read prior testimony, are you aware of the fact that Dr. McCarthy had no explanation for any of that damage to the east door? That's my understanding. Interesting. Now, what can you explain to the jury why the evidence that appears as the cluster of 21 and 5 and 16 supports the opinion that Mrs. Menendez was standing up when she received a shot to an arm that hit that bracelet? Well, there was clear evidence of impact to the bracelet, a portion of which was missing, small fragment missing, and then there was lead residue at the apparent impact point. Okay, why don't you go on and let me take these things out? Is there some human fluid evidence at the site of 21 that also supports the notion that a shot that impacted a person came that way? Yes. There is also blood spatter, apparent blood spatter, again, without having actually been at the scene or had access to collected samples from those. You are making some assumptions, but they seem pretty reasonable that this is blood spatter that is associated. The spatter that's there is associated with or is on the blinds in the area of this impact. So he's saying that he suspects there's blood spatter on the blinds on that door. And apart from the blood on the blinds, is there even blood spatter close to where the bracelet piece is in 21 is found on the floor? Yes. And is that spatter that could have dropped down from the blinds above? Either that, or it could be that the trajectory was significantly low, that this spatter occurred and just is direct spatter. And can you point, in fact, on how H on H? Can you point, in fact, on H to any area of blood spatter that's observable at the base of that east door? There's some right there, he says. This is what now has been numbered 48. Do you recognize any of the handwriting on that envelope? My case number and initials are on this seal. And is that what you do whenever you examine a piece of physical evidence? You put your initials and your case number on the envelope that contains the evidence? Yes. And what is, you can open that up. I think we should get a letter opener or something if you have one. You don't have a knife because of the metal detector. The court says just rip it open. The witness says, this is item 16. It's a portion of the bracelet. Ms. Abramson says, and were you able in examining that in conjunction with 5 and with 21 to fit the pieces of the bracelet together to make almost a whole bracelet? It made a complete bracelet except for a very small fragment adjacent to the lead wipe. The lead wipe was on was on which piece? Do you remember? 21. And handing you an envelope that's been marked here 48B, does that also have your initials and your case number on it? It does. And in fact, you have examined that more than once, have you not? Yes, I have. And you are removing an inner envelope. Let's put one back before you take the other one out. This is item 21C, one of the 3 items collected as group 21, which was lead pellet, fiber wad, and bracelet fragment. The lead pellet and the fiber wad are observable in the interior plastic envelope? Yes. Fiber wad and pellets? Yes. Okay, and now you're holding, this is a part that has what appears to be a lead wipe? Yes, that's correct. Does the lead wipe also appear to have sort of a semicircular shape? Yes, as if a pellet came in contact with it. It could be. It could be because of the configuration of the bracelet itself. I'm not sure what the source of that is. All right, and showing you 48G, does this contain the 2 pieces of bracelet that were labeled 5? Yes. And did you fit together the edge where you saw the lead wipe on 21 with those pieces of 5? I was particularly interested to make sure, well, to try to determine whether or not that lead wipe which was on 21 would appear on the adjacent area. In other words, if you fit something together and there is a residue that goes straight up to the edge and then the other one has nothing, that suggests that that contamination occurred after the split occurred. If they are on both sides, then that confirms that they are and they match. It shows. It confirms that they are part of a transfer that occurred before the break into place. But what happened in looking at that, it was clear that that fragment had been broken away and lost. So there's a piece of the bracelet that has the other piece of the lead from the pellet on it. So there's a piece that has a portion of lead on it, and he can't pair it with another piece that would have the other portion of lead on it. Like visible, you'll see visible lead, I guess, on it. And so he's saying that he can't find the other portion of that bracelet. It's been lost. And did that support the notion that that area had been directly hit with pellets? Yes. And it did confirm, even though in a different way, what you were looking for? Yes. And then, of course, you did a test and you did confirm that the wipe was lead. Objection leading. Sustained. You have already testified to this on Thursday, correct? Yes. Objection asked and answered. All right, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, did you do a test on the piece of 21 that appeared to you to have a lead swipe on it or wipe on it? Yes. And what was the result of that test? Positive test for lead. Okay, so he has to do a swipe or a wipe. I don't know. I don't know what the lead wipe is. Maybe it's not visible to the naked eye. Maybe he has to do a test. No idea. But that's basically what he's saying is like one piece had the lead, the other portion didn't have the lead, and so therefore he is claiming that portion's lost. Now, you indicated when you testified on Thursday that, and this is one of the things where you felt you had a confidence in the conclusion that you could at least position Mrs. Menendez when she received the shots to her right arm. Very roughly, yes. And one of the other things that you said, you had formed a definite conclusion about one of the things you formed a definite conclusion about was the fact that Mr. Menendez was standing when he received the left leg wounds, correct? Yes. If we could take this down, do you want up number 7? It really isn't number 7. It's that's the label. So 304? Yes. Now 304 has a number of enlargements, does it not, of both Mr. Menendez's position as found on the sofa and the area of the rug and the sofa immediately west of him, correct? Yes. And did you select these photographs to be enlarged to illustrate some opinions and conclusions that you had formed? Yes. And what opinions and conclusions, if you could tell us, do these photographs illustrate? And why don't we start with A? What's the significance of photograph A, the one that simply shows the leg in the position in which the police found it? Yes. It shows part of the information that is the basis for my opinion that the shot did not occur while he was in a seated position, and that consists of no spatter on the front of the arm area of the sofa adjacent to where the exit wound is. Could you point to the area while you are describing that? That would be in this area right here, is clean of any spray from the exit wound. In addition to that, there are several drops of blood, apparent blood, under the leg, which show there is some dripping of blood before he was in a seated position, and that's shown in in those two photos. And in addition, there is some indication of his leg rubbing up against his arm on both arms rubbing up against his leg. Can you see that in A, or is that something that B illustrates? B illustrates it somewhat better, and it shows the drop under the leg here. And it shows the smearings on what's called the ulnar side of the left hand and arm, the lower arm, and the left hand. The ulnar bone is on this side. I know more from fingerprints than from. She asks the next question. Well, what is the significance of the fact that well, first of all, you said it was smear. How can you tell that this blood you're talking about this here right along the edge here, he says. In fact, in C, can you see that area also? Yes, it also shows it right along here, the lower arms and the side of the palm. How can you distinguish what appears to be blood in those two locations as smear versus, say, drip? In blood spatter analysis, you do a lot of experiments to look at what blood looks like under various conditions, and blood drippings or drops have a distinctive pattern, and you can see to some extent some, if not drops, but spatter where individual drops are on the left arm in this area. This is a very typical look of smear. In other words, it has blood on it or has come in contact with something with blood on it, wiping across, leaving a fairly uniform pattern rather than isolated drops. And what is the significance of the fact that there is smeared blood along the side of his arm? How is that significant on the issue of, first of all, whether Mr. Menendez was seated when he received that wound, and second, whether Mr. Menendez was alive at the time that he received that leg wound and perhaps thereafter? That is a tremendously compound question, but They didn't object. So he says, "Well, I mean, you can understand what she's trying to say, but it's you should have done it one by one." He says, "Well, I think it shows that that arm must have been down, and you can see smears on the side of this left leg as well as the inner thigh and going down into the area he indicates on the picture. You see some smearing indicating that this arm has been well down on that leg. I don't know what other portion of the body could be the source of that kind of smearing. In addition to that, you have a what appears to be a drip pattern here, which is going down. Here is where, Mr. Morton. Sorry, on the front of the front medial side, inner side of the left leg, there is what appears to be drip patterns going down. Well, the drip pattern has significance vis-a-vis the fact that it appears that it dripped out of the entry wound. Right. And that would indicate for the drip to come out the entry wound that he would have to be standing? That's correct. However, I want to stick with the hand for the moment. Can you envision a position that Mr. Menendez could have been in which to have that transfer of blood from the left leg to the side of his hand? Yes. He would have had to have leaned forward significantly and the arm down between the leg. While seated? Right. And is it your opinion that he received the leg wound standing and then he was seated on the couch leaning forward and then pulled himself up to receive the head wound? Objection leading. Sustained. Okay. Did you have an opinion as to, assuming that at some point Mr. Menendez is doing what you just described, he is leaning forward and the hand is on the inner thigh and the blood is smeared? Objection leading. Overruled. Is it your opinion that obviously he is alive when he is doing that, correct? Yes. And you don't dispute that after the head wound is sorry, and you don't dispute that after the head wound he is no longer alive, correct? I wouldn't argue that. And you don't dispute that for the head wound, well, for him to wind up in the position that he's in, do you have an opinion as to whether or not at the time he received the head wound, he had to be more erect than this position you have shown, leaning forward with the hand inside the thigh? I can't say what position he was in exactly when the head wound occurred. Obviously, if he were down in the lower position, he wouldn't bring himself back up to the position he is finally found in after that head wound. So he must have been in a seated position in some way or another. He wasn't, crouched down, leaning down. He wasn't on the ground. Obviously, he must have already been somewhat seated, crouched, whatever before that head wound happened. But is it your opinion that the body had to come back up to get the head wound, correct? I don't. Objection leading, sustained. Well, do you have an opinion as to what movement might have occurred after the time when the left hand created the smear wound on the ulnar side of the left hand and arm? The body had to come back up. And would you demonstrate what, in your opinion, happened or could have happened? Just show us what you mean by in terms of up. Something like this, and then like this, with the hands down into the lap. And if he had had the hands beneath the thighs, as you have shown, and then came up, then his hands would wind up according to your thesis in the position that we see them in, correct? Yes. And the back of the shoulders would have wound up in the position that we see them in. Objection leading, sustained. Would the back of his shoulders have ended up in the position that we see them in the photographs taken of Mr. Menendez when the police got there? They could, yes. Based on what you just demonstrated, yes. I wish they would have explained for the record because we don't know. So now you indicated that there is some smearing on the left arm and smearing inside the left thigh. Is there also similar appearance with respect to the inner thigh, the inner right thigh? Yes, there is some smearing on the inner right thigh, and I'm not sure if it shows on his right hand. Is there a photograph that significantly visualizes the right hand to see if it's sufficiently. Is there a photograph that sufficiently visualizes the right hand to see if a sufficiently similar smear pattern along the right hand was sufficient? Why do I keep saying significant? Stop it. As there is on the left hand. He says, right now, I don't recall. But the pattern of smear inside the right will strike that. Is the pattern of smear inside the right thigh similar to the pattern of smear inside the left thigh? So that it could have been caused by similar movement of the other hand. It's just much less extensive. So it's very possible that he smeared his right hand on his right thigh, just like the left hand on his left thigh, but it's not as extensive, the smear. So there is less blood smeared on the inner right thigh? Yes. And more blood on the inner left thigh? That's correct. Does that contribute to your opinion that the source of the blood for the smear of his left hand is the leg wound itself? Yes. You are aware, are you not, that there is mass injury to his left elbow? Yes. Could that have been the source of the blood for the smears that you see? It appears to be rather distant for that, and it's not directly associated with the broad smearing that we see here. And you are aware, are you not, that he had very extensive injury from back to front of the right upper arm? That's correct. Would it make sense that that could be the source of blood on the inner right thigh? It could possibly be the source of it. No, I suspect it's not the source of it because that would occur unless it's secondary to some bleeding on the chest or in that area, then it seems likely that it's associated with the left thigh, sorry, the left thigh. So with the what? It seems unlikely that it's associated with the blood smears on the left thigh and the right arm. No, I asked you whether or not the smearing inside the right thigh. I am looking for the source of blood. The source of blood here. Yes. You have told us this is smear, correct? Yes. There is. Can you see Can you see what appears to be blood on his right hand? Yes. And do you have an opinion? Strike that. You indicated that the smearing on the left thigh you believe is affiliated with the wounds and the hand coming in contact with it? Yes. Do you have an opinion as to what the source of the smeared blood on the right thigh is? That's the question. Yes. It would appear to be the result of wounds to the right side and in leaning forward overall the right leg. So you do associate with the right arm wounds. That's the wound to the right side, you mean? Yes. That's the only wound he has above that to the right side, isn't it? That and the wound to the head. But you don't believe he is leaning forward after the wound to the head, do you? No. All right, the court says, let's take our recess and we'll resume at 10:30. So we are going to stop here for today and we will resume with Dr. Morton's testimony tomorrow. He's going to be on the stand for a few days, but he's only on the stand, I think, like a day and a half or something for the court for, trial days. So we have a little bit more of him to go forward. He's still on direct, remember, so we've got to get through his direct and then cross and then any redirect and whatnot. So um, yeah, so we after Dr. Morton though, we have the boat people. So there's Leslie Gaskell and Bob Anderson who operated the boat when they went shark fishing. And then I believe after that we have Erik Menendez on the stand. So that's going to be interesting. So stick with us. Please make sure you are subscribed. Hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching so much. Bye, guys.